In ancient times, there was a young nobleman named Fu Ling. For some unknown reason, Fu Ling was punished by the king and forced into a dead-end situation. Knowing his fate in advance, Fu Ling entrusted a servant named Xiao Han with a scroll, instructing him to take it and leave. Xiao Han knew this was a treasured heirloom of Fu Ling's family, but since Fu Ling had given it to him, he had no choice but to flee, change his name, and endure humiliation to survive. The king would surely eradicate Fu Ling's entire bloodline, but if one day the scroll was unexpectedly discovered by someone, Xiao Han was obligated to guide and lead that person in inheriting Fu Ling's will and completing the unfinished mission that Fu Ling himself could not accomplish. Fu Ling regretted making Xiao Han witness this tragic event, but he believed Xiao Han would fulfill the task he had entrusted to him. He had yet to fully uncover the truth of the world, so he wanted to leave behind his legacy for future generations to continue his unfinished path. Time passed, and the story shifted to a lake where a boatman was rowing in the middle of the water. Unexpectedly, this boatman murdered a woman right on the boat and then discarded her body into the lake. On the shore, a young woman arrived at the lake, and an old man informed her that recently, a thick fog had been covering the area, making it impossible for anyone to continue working as a boatman. Only a single scholar remained to ferry people across. Soon after, this scholar returned to the dock and introduced himself as Di Sheng, saying he had come to take over the job of the previous boatman. The young woman and a few others then boarded the boat to cross to the other side. The boat had an assortment of pastries and tea prepared for them, allowing them to eat and enjoy the scenery while waiting to reach the opposite shore. The young woman unexpectedly met a blonde-haired young man who was devouring the pastries voraciously. Seeing this, she poured him a cup of tea, and he explained that he hadn't eaten anything recently and was very hungry. As the boat departed, the young woman, having been invited, also tried a few pastries. The young man then gave her a piece of candy to eat before sitting back to enjoy the view. Not long after, all the passengers on the boat gradually fell asleep. The young woman, however, suddenly woke up and asked Di Sheng how far they had traveled and whether he could see through the dense fog. Di Sheng unexpectedly began telling her a story. Long ago, there was a deeply in love couple, but due to differences in social status, the girl's parents forced her to break up with the young man, who was merely a poor scholar. The forced separation broke the young woman's heart, leading her to fall ill and pass away. Not long after, when the young man heard the news, he was devastated. In his grief, he stole her body and mourned for her every day. One day, he suddenly saw her figure on the mist-covered lake. Recognizing her as his beloved, he tried to reach her, but the distance was too great, so he could only stand on the shore and watch. Over time, the distance between them grew smaller and smaller until they could finally be together. The young man followed her into the mysterious lake. However, Di Sheng believed that the scholar was only able to reunite with his beloved because his own life force was fading, allowing them to meet once his life had ended. The blonde-haired young man, having woken up at this point, accused Di Sheng of attempting the reverse using the lives of the living to bridge the gap between the realms of the dead and the living. He exposed Di Sheng's trick of drugging the pastries and scoffed at the idea of such a cheap trick fooling him. At that moment, another person arrived, steering a boat closer. He dismissed Di Sheng's story as nothing more than deceptive words meant to mislead others. In reality, he claimed, the scholar in the story was just a madman who, overwhelmed by his longing for his lost love, had simply jumped into the lake and drowned. Di Sheng refused to believe this and insisted that he had seen the spirit of his beloved. He declared that just a few more sacrifices would be enough. Without hesitation, the man wielding a sword immediately lunged forward and slew Di Sheng, sending him to the afterlife to reunite with his beloved, just as he wished. The blonde-haired young man then asked why the swordsman had acted so ruthlessly. The man replied that Di Sheng had committed murder and thus deserved to be punished by death. He then invited the blonde-haired young man to accompany him, but the young man declined. The fog over the lake then completely dissipated, while the young woman wondered who among them had been telling the truth. The young man remarked that the heavens often do not reveal the full truth to mortals, and that, at times, this could be considered a mercy. That night, the young man went to meet an acquaintance in town. It was revealed that his name was Yang Yao, while the other man was Yan An. For the past 2 years, Yang Yao had been freeloading meals at Yan An's house, so Yan An decided that today, he would not treat Yang Yao to a meal. Yang Yao then asked about the young woman secretly watching Yan An from afar, and Yan An stated that she had been following him for quite some time, but he had been unable to approach her. Since he could no longer freeload, Yang Yao left, only to be unexpectedly approached by the young woman. She asked Yang Yao for Yan An's name and said she had something to discuss with him, but Yang Yao told her that Yan An was not someone easily approachable. Suddenly, demons appeared and attacked Yan An, prompting him to retaliate immediately. The young woman then realized that the demons were being drawn to the lantern Yan and was holding and rushed toward him. Yan En, caught off guard by her sudden approach, dropped the lantern into her hands. As expected, the demons were attracted to the lantern and started chasing after the young woman. Yan En quickly instructed Yang Yao to take care of her while he set up a formation. Yan En proceeded to establish a magical array while Yang Yao unrolled a scroll and began drawing. He then made the young woman vanish just before Yan En unleashed his spell, summoning a crow that swiftly flew over and annihilated the demons. Yan En then asked where the young woman had gone, to which Yang Yao responded that he had sealed her inside the scroll. He urged Yan En to at least listen to what she had to say, and if possible, to take her in as a servant since he was a busy demon slayer. However, Yan En considered himself to be a poisonous existence and could not allow anyone to stay by his side for too long. Yang Yao simply wanted him to hear the young woman out. Yan En then placed 2 drops of blood on the painting, releasing the young woman. She was overjoyed to finally meet Yan En in person. When he asked for her name, she replied that someone like him should not trouble himself by knowing the name of someone who would not be returning. She only wanted to thank him before transforming into a small cup of wine. Yan En suddenly recalled that years ago, during a work trip, he had come across a deceased young woman by the roadside. He had buried her and placed this very cup of wine atop her grave. It seemed she had now returned simply to express her gratitude. Yang Yao realized that he had learned something today. The longing of the living for the dead leads to decay, whereas the longing of the dead for the living allows them to flourish. Yang Yao then invited Yan En out for a meal, but Yan En knew all too well that he would ultimately be the one paying. The following morning, Yan En unexpectedly had visitors. These individuals did not seem ordinary, as they had come to purchase a significant amount of wine from his house. After the white-haired young woman took the wine, the black-haired young woman decided to stay with some of their attendants for a while. The white-haired woman told her that she could do as she pleased, as long as she did not cause trouble for their master. As soon as they left, Yan En suddenly sensed that someone nearby was watching him, but he did not pay much attention and returned inside. Yang Yao then unexpectedly arrived again, claiming he had come to congratulate Yan En. Since Yan En had made a fortune selling a single jar of wine the previous day, and now had sold 10 times as much, he was surely about to become wealthy. Moving on to the main topic, Yang Yao asked if Yan En knew the background of these people, as they were spending money lavishly and were clearly not ordinary individuals. Yan En was not entirely sure, but guessed they were associated with someone named Jin Tian. Yang Yao believed these people were exceedingly ostentatious ordinary cultivators typically dressed modestly. Yet these individuals were adorned in gold, silver, and luxurious garments. After some rambling, Yang Yao finally got to his real purpose, asking Yan En for money. He was immediately kicked out of the house. Wandering through the marketplace with nothing to eat, Yang Yao felt disheartened. He then turned to the young woman named Xuan Kai, asking if there was a way for him to return to the spirit realm to restore his strength whenever he was hungry, rather than having to find food like an ordinary human. Xuan Kai was originally a demon and was currently working for Yan En. She was also rather quiet. Yang Yao then unexpectedly noticed the black-haired girl from the morning, who had come to buy wine, along with several others who were preaching doctrines and promoting their Jin Tian in this place. He found their display to be excessively ostentatious. He then observed that the surrounding people were wary and regarded them as frauds. However, soon after, a man led his father to the black-haired girl, asking for her help. Yang Yao realized that this was a staged act and that the father and son were part of the girl's scheme. The girl then claimed that the father was being tormented by demons and took out a Jin Tian talisman to perform a ritual. The talisman quickly turned red and burst into flames, and the father immediately recovered, making the surrounding villagers believe in her without question. Yang Yao was surprised that such an artificial scenario could still earn the people's trust. As a result, the villagers eagerly rushed forward to buy the talismans to protect their homes from misfortune. Suddenly, a poor young boy approached, begging the black-haired girl to treat his father, who had been unable to walk for several days. As she was dragged away, she asked if the boy had money to pay. She offered him the lowest price that the villagers had paid for a talisman, but the boy had no money. Yang Yao then stepped in and decided to pay on the boy's behalf. Since he had no money either, he planned to use Yan En's wine as payment instead. The three then set off toward the boy's home. The girl wondered why Yang Yao was following them, and he replied that he needed to observe the treatment process. He also asked what the boy's father did for a living. The boy replied that he and his father were simple farmers, leading Yang Yao to suspect that the father had contracted an illness from the soil. Their home was originally an abandoned mansion that once belonged to a wealthy family, so they had temporarily moved in. Upon arriving, Yang Yao suddenly hoisted the boy up a tree, instructing him to stay put and not enter the house. As soon as he stepped inside and saw the boy's father, Yang Yao asked the girl if she could see the entity inside. She could only sense it, but could not see it clearly, as it was not nighttime. Yang Yao then asked if she knew how to use Yan'an's wine, tossing her a flask of it to help her perceive the presence haunting the house. It was a stone statue. Yang Yao speculated that wealthy families often place stone statues to guard their homes. Even though the family had long since left, the guardian statue had remained to fulfill its duty. It seemed that the boy's father had accidentally unearthed it, leading to his affliction. The girl wanted Yang Yao's assistance instead of his endless explanations, but he stated that he simply wanted to see how a disciple of Jin Tian would handle such a minor problem. Unwilling to let a Jin Tian disciple be seen as incompetent, the girl took out a talisman to attack the stone statue. However, the statue let out a roar and sent her flying. Just as it was about to crush her, Yang Yao used his scroll to absorb the stone statue, reverting it to its original form. He told her that simply burying it would be enough to earn merit. She realized that she had been completely ineffective and acknowledged his great skill. She then asked to know his true identity, but he merely claimed to be a wandering traveler unworthy of mention. She invited him to join Jin Tian under her command so that he would no longer have to drift through the world. She believed that with his talent, he could gain fame and fortune. However, he refused to deceive people for money. The girl became angry, arguing that if he told the truth, people would merely see him as a freak or a monster. Yang Yao had to know how unfair the world was to people like them. Only people like them could see demons, while ordinary people could not. Because of this, ordinary people did not believe in the words of those with special abilities. They only trusted what they saw and what they believed in, while those with special abilities were despised and ostracized. And yet, people like them still had to protect humans. What gave humans the right to make them endure such injustice? She claimed that Jin Tian was the one who had reclaimed fairness for people like her. So she accepted having to lie if necessary, but Yang Yao did not agree with that. He believed that as long as he followed his own principles, it was enough. There was no need to abide by the principles of heaven and earth. Later, they encountered the girl who had previously been watching Yan, and her name was Ji Lei. She unexpectedly sought out Yan and asking to become his disciple, but Yan refused. Ji Lei then reminded Yan of how much hardship and suffering her mother had endured because of the world. She could not accept that her mother had to remain alone for the rest of her life, without being able to change anything. However, Yan believed that nature had already decided everything, and no one could go against it. What was lost could never be changed. That night, Ji Lei ordered her younger brother to steal a jar of Yan's wine to help her reunite with their mother. When Yan inspected the wine storage that night, he discovered what had happened. Ji Lei and her brother took the jar to a ritual site. After placing talismans in the necessary positions, she poured the wine over the ritual formation, creating a glowing orb. She then had the orb absorb the talismans, turning it into a ball of fire. Her brother recognized it as their mother's magic, even though she had never taught them. Naturally, Ji Lei had secretly learned it, and now she wanted to meet her mother again to ask about her unresolved questions. She then handed over the rest of the ritual to her younger brother, following the instructions their mother had passed down to him. Not long after, Ji Lei suddenly rushed to Yan for help. Yan realized that the stolen wine had caused some sort of disaster. Yang Yao, who had been sleeping on a nearby rooftop, also overheard the commotion. Ji Lei admitted to stealing the wine but pleaded with Yan to help her brother, as he was innocent and had no part in her wrongdoing. Yan left, not to abandon her, but to help. On the way, he asked her what her true goal was. She confessed that she simply wanted to see her mother one more time. However, Yan told her that the dead were dead, and the living had to continue on. But Ji Lei was not willing to accept that. She had once heard that her mother was incredibly beautiful and had gentle eyes. Yet, because of a single betrayal, her mother had changed drastically, living forever in solitude with a heart as cold as ashes. Yan said that nothing ever goes the way one desires, so what was in the past should remain in the past. When they arrived at the ritual site, Yan was astonished that the two children had managed to accomplish this much. He then saw their mother's vengeful spirit and immediately attacked to drive her away from her younger brother. However, she recovered quickly and began fighting back against Yan. He told Ji Lei to take her brother and leave, but she suddenly turned against him, grabbing a mallet and striking the ritual formation. The impact created a reverberation that caused both the vengeful spirit and her brother to suffer severe headaches. She then declared that she had never truly cared for her brother. She believed he was unworthy of being their mother's son, so she would use him as a sacrificial offering. because she deeply revered and cherished their mother. She was willing to do anything to restore the honor that their mother held dear. She then repeatedly struck the drum, making the reverberations even more intense. Yanan tried to carry her brother out of the ritual formation, but he was also trapped inside. After the relentless drum beats, their mother's vengeful spirit suddenly vanished. Ji Lei then blamed Yanan for her mother's disappearance, pushing her brother into an uncontrollable rage, causing him to attack Yanan. The younger brother unexpectedly conjured vines to bind Yanan tightly, and Ji Lei even tried to coax him into drawing his sword to finish Yanan off. The brother charged forward and stabbed Yanan. Yanan tried to warn them that his blood was poisonous, but of course, Ji Lei already knew that she wanted her brother to perish as well. The poison in Yanan's blood retaliated, and the blood that splattered onto the younger brother caused him immense pain. Yanan then collapsed, his blood seeping out and filling the ritual formation. The formation was then activated, forcing Yang Yao to rush over. He quickly called Xuan Kai forward and told her to destroy certain parts of the formation. However, Yanan desperately tried to warn Yang Yao not to come any closer. Meanwhile, we met the renowned Jin Tian. He had come to visit a monk named Mr. Shan. After exchanging a few pleasantries with Mr. Shan, he entered to greet an official inside. Jin Tian remarked that, from now on, they were working under the imperial court, so they should look out for one another. But when Jin Tian entered, Mr. Shan smiled and remarked that he was nothing more than a monkey wearing a human's hat, and sooner or later, he would show him what true fortune really was. Meanwhile, Yang Yao had taken Yanan to a safe place. When Yanan regained consciousness, he asked where they were and how long he had been unconscious. Yang Yao told him that he had only been unconscious for a short while, and that this place seemed to be beneath the altar, with a passageway ahead. When Yang Yao tried to help Yanan move, Yanan warned him not to touch his poisonous blood. However, Yang Yao joked that maybe he had a peculiar constitution that could resist the poison. Yanan insisted that no one could withstand his blood. He then told Yang Yao about a famous healer from the previous generation, whom Yang Yao had heard of before. She had spent her life helping countless people and had promised to cure Yanan's poisonous blood. But in the end, even she could not withstand the poison and passed away unexpectedly. That healer was Yanan's mother. Because of that, Yanan believed he could never come into contact with ordinary people. Yang Yao could only sigh and then unrolled a special scroll, wrapping Yanan in it. He explained that this scroll was waterproof and fireproof, so he could carry Yanan without worrying about touching his blood. As Yang Yao carried Yanan, he asked about the two children from before. Yanan explained that they were the children of a certain lady and had inherited some of their mother's talents. That lady had been a renowned demon exterminator, but since that was 30 years ago, Yang Yao likely had never heard of her. The two eventually discovered a massive door. When Yang Yao pushed it, it unexpectedly opened. However, as they stepped inside, they tripped over the high threshold and fell. Yanan examined the murals on the walls while Yang Yao noticed a massive sword bound in chains. Curious about what Yanan was doing, Yang Yao glanced at him and saw him staring intently at the murals, looking quite astonished. Yang Yao then ran to examine the murals himself and found inscriptions stating that these paintings depicted the 12 generals of the Yin Yin clan. Yanan seemed to recognize these names and found it hard to believe what he was seeing. He was so stunned that he asked Yang Yao to help him leave through the main entrance. When they stepped outside, they were shocked to find that this was the same altar from the previous night. However, instead of being in ruins, it had been fully restored to its original grandeur. Yang Yao refused to believe it was an illusion because everything felt too real. Even though Yanan knew this was not an illusion, he could not accept that this place was real, as the Yin Yin clan had disappeared without a trace in ancient times. Suddenly, a woman appeared. She was Ji Lei's mother, Lady Fu Ling. She recognized Yanan and, upon seeing his injuries, offered to treat him. She also inquired about Yang Yao, to which Yanan introduced him as a friend. As they walked, Yang Yao marveled at how the ruins from the previous night had once been so magnificent. He also wondered how Fu Ling knew Yanan. Yanan explained that he had visited her with his father when he was 5 years old. Yet, somehow, she still recognized him after all these years. Yang Yao also found it hard to believe that Fu Ling, despite having 2 children, still looked so youthful. Yanan could only take things as they came. Fu Ling then summoned a large number of physicians to treat Yanan. He warned them about his poisonous blood, fearing that it would harm them. Fu Ling instructed those who were experienced and knowledgeable about Yanan's condition to stay while the rest were asked to wait outside. 3 physicians remained, assuring Yan and that they were well aware of his blood's nature and would be careful not to make any mistakes that would force him to harm them unintentionally. They prepared all necessary precautions to avoid direct contact with his blood. Once everything was settled, they took their leave, allowing Yanan to rest and recover. Sometime later, as Yan En was recuperating, a maid suddenly arrived, prompting Yang Yao to step outside and investigate. The maid reported that someone had delivered a letter for Yan En. The sender was a young girl around her age, carrying a lantern and wearing a bell on her foot. However, the letter was blank, leaving Yang Yao puzzled about its contents. But Yan En requested to see it, and the moment he held it, he understood the message it was from his father. Yang Yao then ran outside to check the situation, and was surprised to see that everything looked different from how he remembered it. Suddenly, an old woman recognized that he had come from Lady Fuling's residence and assumed he was an honored guest of hers. She also believed him to be a demon exterminator, expressing deep gratitude and attributing the peace of the land to people like him. She offered him some cakes as thanks. Upon hearing this, others also decided to offer him food to gain his favor. Although Yang Yao did not fully understand the situation, he was delighted to receive food. Soon, the townspeople surrounded him with gifts, and before he knew it, he was being offered more than he could carry, even livestock such as cows and goats. Overwhelmed and confused, he accepted the gifts, only to be startled when they suddenly bowed to him. Unable to handle the situation, he hurriedly ran away. Meanwhile, Lady Fuling was preparing for an upcoming festival when she noticed Ji Lei peeking into her residence. Mistaking her for a homeless girl, she brought out some food for her. Observing that Ji Lei was not from around here, she asked for her name and where she came from. Ji Lei, feeling satisfied just to see her mother again, gave her real name but chose to act as though they were strangers. Elsewhere, in the current ruins, a man known as Mr. Money Eyes had arrived. He vowed never to forget the injustices done to their kind, the people of the Yin Yin clan, and even to the once great Lord Fuling. Meanwhile, Yang Yao had managed to escape the overly enthusiastic townspeople and was panting from exhaustion. While receiving gifts was nice, something felt off. The people had referred to him as a member of the Yin Yin clan, which confused him. Then, hearing the sound of flowing water nearby, he leaped onto a wall to investigate. Seeing nothing but a regular courtyard, he closed his eyes to focus his hearing. Suddenly, he perceived strange images and jumped down only to fall straight into water. Emerging from the surface, he realized that the area he had fallen into was completely different from what he had seen before. As he explored the mysterious place, he marveled at its existence. At the same time, Yan En had recovered enough to walk and was gazing at the sky when Yang Yao returned. Curious, Yang Yao asked what he was doing. Yan En explained that he had been trying to summon his bird, but it would not appear. Although the bird belonged to him, he had never actually raised it. Yang Yao joked that any creature capable of forming a bond with Yan En must have an extraordinary ability to understand him. He asked for the bird's name, but Yan En admitted he had never named it. Yang Yao argued that even creatures like the spirit beast Xuan Kai had names, so every being should have one. Moving on from the topic, Yan En wanted Yang Yao to see something. He deliberately cut his own hand, prompting Yang Yao to scold him for creating more wounds. However, Yan En wanted to show him that, strangely, his blood no longer withered living things like plants. Yang Yao assumed that Yan En's poison was gone and reached out to touch it, but Yan En stopped him, refusing to let him take such a reckless risk. Then, Yang Yao showed Yan En something amusing. He suddenly made him fall straight into the same pond he had discovered earlier. Yan En was shocked that a simple courtyard had turned into a body of water. Yang Yao explained that swimming back in one direction would lead them to their original location, but there was another path to explore. Curious, they followed it and arrived at a market in the outskirts. Since they had no idea where they were, Yang Yao approached a young woman and asked for directions to Lady Fuling's residence. She told them it was to the north, but Yan En found this strange. Based on their previous movements, Fuling's house should have been to the south. However, since they had no knowledge of the area, they decided to follow the girl's instructions. But just as they began walking, the girl suddenly vanished. A noodle shop owner called out to them, asking if they wanted to eat before he closed up to prepare for tomorrow's festival. When they inquired about the festival, he explained that it was an event established by Lady Fuling to honor a certain great figure. Curious, Yang Yao asked who this person was, and the shopkeeper revealed that it was none other than Fuling. He then began recounting how, in the past, when demons wreaked havoc upon humans, it was Lord Fuling who made the demons reveal their true forms to humans, and it was he who bestowed blessings and saved the people from suffering. Yang Yao reasoned that if they were holding a sacrificial ceremony for him, then it must mean that Lord Fuling had already died. However, the noodle shop owner became angry, insisting that Fuling was a special being with an immortal body and could not simply die like an ordinary person. That night, the ceremony took place. Meanwhile, Ji Lei, upon seeing her mother in her prime, youthful and radiant, could hardly believe it, especially remembering her as an old and sorrowful woman in her later years. She could not accept this reality. Mr. Shan, who was also unexpectedly present, remarked that if even Ji Lei could not accept it, then how could he possibly come to terms with this era? At the same time, Yan En revealed to Yang Yao that in the past, demon exterminators like them were considered part of the Yin Yin clan. However, the rise and sudden disappearance of the golden age of demon exterminators had no clues or explanations. Suddenly, in the middle of the ceremony, a strong gust of wind swept through. Recognizing the aura of this wind, Yan En pursued it, only to find that it had suddenly vanished. Yang Yao followed as well and realized that the wind seemed to be Yan En's bird. He advised Yan En to give it a name instead of simply calling it vaguely. Yang Yao then noticed that the sky had suddenly brightened, even though the night had only just begun. The two of them approached a local and asked about the ceremony, only to be told that the ritual would take place tomorrow. The old woman who had given Yang Yao cakes also assumed they were outsiders. When Yang Yao tried to remind her that she had given him cakes earlier, she claimed she had never met him before. Left with no choice, he withdrew. As the two wandered through the town, they asked several people, but none of them seemed to recognize them. Even Lady Fu Ling's two handmaidens acted as if they had never seen them before. Then, unexpectedly, Yang Yao encountered the girl from the outskirts again, and she still recognized them. She explained that she had been here for a long time and knew that the people in this place only lived and acted according to predetermined roles. This was a time loop that restarted every morning before the festival and lasted until the night of the ceremony. She had been trapped in this loop for a long time. A few days earlier, Mr. Shan had unexpectedly sought out Ji Lei, claiming to be an old friend of Lady Fu Ling. Ji Lei, believing her mother to be dead, tried to dismiss him, but Mr. Shan reassured them that he had come to help. He asked if they wanted to see Lady Fu Ling again. At that time, Ji Lei refused to believe him, insisting that her mother was dead and warning him not to joke about it. However, Mr. Shan assured her that if he said there was a way, then there was indeed a way. He then asked if they had ever heard of the era of the Yin Yin clan, the most glorious period for demon exterminators. Ji Lei admitted that her mother had spoken of it before, but no one else around them ever mentioned it. She knew it was a time when the people deeply respected and admired demon exterminators, but she had no idea what happened afterward or why it had been forgotten by humanity. Mr. Shan explained that this golden era was created by those who had been chosen, and their mother was one of the most revered individuals of that time. He then asked if Ji Lei did not wish to see that era once more. Meanwhile, Yang Yao asked the girl, since she had been here for so long, if she knew how to escape. However, she replied that she did not know, nor did she wish to leave. Yang Yao was puzzled as to what this place was and why they were here. She believed she had already explained everything in her previous letter. Yan En then realized that the letter they had received earlier had not been from his father, but from this girl. She did not reveal who she was, only that she had always been here, existing to observe everything happening in this place day after day, month after month. Everything here would continue to repeat itself exactly the same way, as these were events that had already happened in the past. Yet, paradoxically, this was not the past. She could not provide them with detailed answers, only respond to yes or no questions. Yang Yao then asked if this place was real. She answered that it was real, but also not entirely real. It could be said that it was like a play. Yan En understood and explained to Yang Yao that although this place was an illusion, their experience of it was real. The reason she had said that this was not the past was because the past was something that could change the future, whereas no matter what they did here, it would not affect reality or the future. Yang Yao then asked if she was willing to help them escape, but she replied that she was someone who was never remembered by others, and she wanted to experience what it felt like to be remembered. Yang Yao suggested that she introduce herself first and told her his and Yan En's names so that next time she met them, she wouldn't need to ask again. When he asked for her name, she revealed that she was Qing Wen. Meanwhile, Lady Fu Ling continued her preparations for the ceremony and encountered Ji Lei again. Seeing Ji Lei standing there since morning, she approached and asked why. Ji Lei admitted that she was simply watching Lady Fu Ling, as she was admired by so many people, possessing strength, power, and glory. Seeing her happy was enough to make Ji Lei happy as well. Lady Fu Ling was pleased to hear this, but explained that her happiness did not come from power, but from the people around her. She offered to let Ji Lei stay if she had nowhere to go. However, Ji Lei chose to leave and was soon spotted by Yang Yao and Yan En, who quickly pursued her. Ji Lei tried to throw objects to slow them down, but Yang Yao swiftly caught up and restrained her. He accused her of leading them into this place and insisted that she must know how to get out. However, she refused to speak. Suddenly, a masked figure appeared and attacked Yang Yao. As Yang Yao dodged, the figure seized Ji Lei and escaped, throwing a dagger to block their pursuit. Yang Yao attempted to summon Xuan Kai to attack, but Xuan Kai did not appear. Yan began to find this strange, realizing that their special abilities seemed ineffective in this place. The two wandered through the town as Yan pondered their situation. Yang Yao pointed out that their powers came from external influences, and since only they had entered this place while the source of their powers had not, that was why their abilities were not working. However, after the ceremony, Yan had sensed his bird again through the wind. This led Yang Yao to deduce that the source of the wind must be the intersection between two worlds. Meanwhile, Ji Lei asked the masked figure who he was and why he had saved her. The figure, who appeared to be gravely injured, did not want her to see his face and fled. He later collapsed and was taken in for treatment by Mr. Shan. The masked figure was none other than Ji Lei's younger brother. He deeply cared for his sister and knew she was stubborn and determined to inherit their mother's legacy. However, he opposed her because he feared she would follow their mother's tragic path. Mr. Shan countered that the younger brother was the stubborn one because Ji Lei was not even capable of inheriting Lady Fu Ling's legacy, she was merely an adopted child. The true heir was him. The younger brother, realizing that Mr. Shan knew this, questioned why he had brought Ji Lei here. Mr. Shan's true intention was to use Ji Lei as a means to indirectly pressure the younger brother into continuing their mother's legacy. If this was what his sister wanted, then the younger brother was willing to help Mr. Shan. Meanwhile, Yang Yao identified a loophole and devised a well-thought-out plan. He realized where the time loop began, so he reasoned that if he ordered a lavish meal at the end of the cycle, by the time the loop restarted, no one would remember, and he wouldn't have to pay for it. Yan was dumbfounded by Yang Yao's thought process and questioned why he had not cut ties with him yet. He then reminded Yang Yao that the restaurant was about to close and would not let him run up a tab. While they were struggling to find a way out, Yang Yao still had the mindset to think about food. Yang Yao argued that since they couldn't leave, they should at least live well while stuck here. He wasn't wrong. The two then reconsidered and concluded that this entire space had limits, and if they reached those limits, they would be forcibly returned. So he wanted to try finding the central point of this place. He ran ahead, while Yan realized that once again, he was left behind to pay. As he explored, Yang Yao rescued a drowning child, and soon after, the girl's mother arrived to thank him. However, Qing Wen stated that the girl could not be saved because outcomes in this world could not be changed. Yang Yao acknowledged that while there were some things that could not be changed no matter what one did, there were also things that, even knowing the result, one still could not ignore. Qing Wen observed that Yang Yao and Yan were quite noisy compared to outsiders here. He assumed she was referring to the two children they had encountered earlier, but it turned out to be more than just that. Yang Yao then returned to find Yan and reported that after testing both the northern and southern directions, he had determined the boundary limit by counting his steps. Now, he needed to check the remaining directions. The two then worked together to determine the limits in all 8 directions and identified the world's central point. It was located near Lady Fu Ling's residence. However, there was also a tall tower above it. Yan wondered about the light at the top, and Yang Yao explained that it was a Den Kyo Quan, a lantern with paper cutouts of people and horses. When it spun, it created the illusion of galloping horses. This endless motion made Yan realize that the world itself was operating in the same way. At the same time, a group of people in black appeared at the top of the tower, guarding the lantern. Yang Yao then climbed the wall to sneak in, as he was used to scaling Yan's walls this way. Suddenly, he was discovered by the guards and had to flee. He stumbled and fell, prompting him to open a scroll to summon Xuan Kai, but it was still ineffective. Yan had to step in to help, and the two temporarily evaded the guards. Yan remarked that Yang Yao was finally seeing the consequences of climbing into other people's homes. Returning to the main issue, Yan believed that the lantern was the key to this world and would provide the answers they sought. As they searched for a way up, Yang Yao accidentally stepped on a branch, alerting the guards. With no other choice, the two charged forward and knocked down their pursuers. Yang Yao then pulled Yan onto the rooftop to climb higher. Suddenly, Xuan Kai appeared to assist Yang Yao. He urged Yan to summon his bird, but Yan had never named it. Yang Yao told him to pick any name, so Yan blurted out Chim Bao Fat Bird. Unexpectedly, the bird immediately flew to him, tearing through the lantern as it approached. The entire world then cracked apart and gradually dissolved. The two successfully escaped, and Yan asked Yang Yao if the bird's name could be changed. Upon returning home, Yang Yao asked Yan if he knew anything about the name Yin Yin. Yan explained that it was the title used for exorcists who once protected people and followed Lord Fu Ling. However, he did not know why it had been forgotten. His own family had been invited to follow Fu Ling, but due to their unique poisonous bloodline, they had refused to interact with outsiders. Yang Yao was surprised that an entire era had been erased without a trace in just 30 years, except for the memories of those who had lived through it. The only remaining clue was the lantern. When Yang Yao asked about the progress in restoring it, Yan found that the lantern only recorded the weather and events from the world they had just escaped. Yang Yao was amazed that someone could recreate an entire world so accurately. Yan noted that whoever made it had the ability to create objects from paper, while Yang Yao could seal real objects into paper, meaning their abilities were similar but used differently. Yan asked Yang Yao if he could create a world like the lantern. But Yang Yao believed that humans should respect heaven and earth, so such things should not be taken lightly. Yan was surprised to hear him speak so seriously. Deciding not to reconstruct the lantern, Yan found it unremarkable. Only the signature and seal had missing fragments, making it impossible to restore completely. Yang Yao could no longer understand the lantern or why Qing, when someone unaffected by that world's rules, was inside it. His fascination with the Yin clan stemmed from the idea of exorcists being both respected and joyful in their work. But Yan was indifferent, having grown used to being alone. Yan then asked if Yang Yao could identify the type of paper used in the lantern, assuming an artist like him would be knowledgeable. But Yang Yao was uncertain and had to find another way to determine it. When Yan was confused, Yang Yao explained that he had more than one spirit, though not all were as obedient as Xuan Kai, so he rarely summoned them. He then decided to call forth another spirit, Jian Su. Upon appearing, she immediately hurled harsh words at Yang Yao, clearly despising him. She was shocked that someone as wicked as him had made friends. Yan also doubted that she was a servant spirit. Yang Yao wanted her help, but she ignored him. He insisted that she at least let him finish speaking, but she found it amusing since he had ignored her pleas in the past. When Yang Yao told her not to bring up old matters, she refused, saying that if he disliked her, he could erase her after all. It wouldn't be difficult for him, and it wouldn't be the first time. Yang Yao claimed that last time was unintentional, but his words only enraged Jian Su further. She attacked him, and he told Yan not to interfere. Jian Su accused Yang Yao of not valuing lives and swore never to forgive him. Even as he sealed her away again, she declared that she would never forgive him for sacrificing that child. Yan asked why Jian Su hated him so much and who the child was. Yang Yao explained that his scroll could seal anything, so he was now careful with his brush. However, in his reckless youth, he had once drawn something forbidden, a living being. That child was Zilan. In the past, Jian Su had been very close to Yang Yao, acting as his assistant and teaching him the potential of his scroll. Curious whether he could seal inanimate objects, he tested it by drawing a broccoli and planned to add eyes. This led to the accidental creation of Zilan, a sentient, living broccoli. He still had Zilan's drawing with him. At the time, he could not process what he had done and considered eliminating Zilan, finding it unnatural. This was why Jian Su loathed him. She believed he carelessly created life and then discarded it at will. To her, what did life mean to him? Was it dictated by his whims? If so, he was no better than a beast. Yan realized that Yang Yao had not actually erased Zilan, but since he did not know its whereabouts, he could not reconcile with Jian Su. That night, Yang Yao reflected on this. Creating Zilan was his mistake, but was letting it live truly the responsible choice? As he struggled with his thoughts, Jian Su suddenly broke free from the scroll and took control of his body. Discovering that Zilan had not been erased, she forced him to draw eyes on Zilan to summon it. The moment Zilan appeared, Jian Su ordered it to flee, and only then did she release Yang Yao. When he asked why she did that, she remained silent and returned to the scroll. Later, they encountered two students of Jin Tian, a Ling, the white-haired one, and a Chu, the black-haired girl. A Ling wondered why a Chu had been saving up so much money, to which she replied that she wanted to accumulate wealth to change her life. Only with money and fame would people respect her, just like how their Jin Tian was revered by thousands. Having grown up in poverty, she had become obsessed with money because the poor, even in death, were unnoticed and unimportant. However, a Ling believed that all lives were the same and no different from wild animals, whether humans died or not. It was no different from plants or beasts perishing. That morning, Yang Yao went searching for Roman 11 land. In the past, Jian Su had reprimanded him for creating a new life without careful thought. He found Zilan rather soft, but Jian Su gave him a knock for hurting it. The fact that Zilan could feel pain meant it also had the ability to experience birth, aging, illness, and death like any other living creature. Yang Yao searched for Zilan everywhere he could, but people likely still thought he was crazy for looking for a broccoli with eyes. He had also once wondered whether Zilan ate or drank and discovered that it did not eat vegetables, perhaps because that would be akin to eating its own kind, but it did like century eggs. At that time, Giant Su had forced Zilan to become independent by making it use chopsticks to pick up food. No matter how hard Zilan tried, it couldn't do it, so Yang Yao wanted to help. However, Giant Su was very strict, embodying the essence of a typical Asian mother. In the present, Yang Yao unexpectedly asked a group of children and learned of Zilan's whereabouts. In the past, there was a time when Yang Yao had stayed with Zilan in an abandoned temple. He had already struggled to take care of himself, yet now he had taken in a freeloading child like Zilan. Wanting to help, Zilan had brought him onions and garlic, but he dismissed them as food that wouldn't fill him up. Feeling guilty, Zilan could only sulk in a corner. Unexpectedly, Yang Yao thought it looked like a delicious plate of broccoli, and when Giant Su returned with fish for him, she found him biting Zilan's head, prompting her to give him a beating. At that moment, Yang Yao noticed a young boy being bullied and called a monster by a group of children. This reminded him of when Zilan had been discovered by villagers and labeled a monster. Even he had been implicated, seen as a monster's accomplice, and driven away by the villagers, forcing him to flee with Zilan in his arms. When Giant Su returned, she advised him to ignore those ignorant villagers since they had no idea how much effort the two of them had put into protecting them. She refused to accept the notion that she had to protect people who saw her as a harmful monster. Ordinary people could neither see nor harm monsters, yet they still went out of their way to bully her and Zilan. However, at the time, Yang Yao also believed that the villagers' fear of Zilan wasn't entirely baseless because he, too, was afraid. While Zilan might be harmless now, who knew what it could become in the future? He felt a deep fear at the thought that the life he had created could turn into something terrifying. Because Zilan was a being he had brought into existence, something that shouldn't even exist in this world, he felt it was his responsibility to eliminate it. Meanwhile, a Chu arrived at a village to warn the villagers about the imminent 3 months of heavy rain and flooding, claiming that she could prevent the disaster provided they paid her a small fee. The villagers, believing that rain and storms were dictated by nature, saw a Chu as a fraud. After all, they had never even heard of Jin Tian, whom she served. A Ling advised her not to be too hasty, as this place was far from where Jin Tian resided, so it was natural for the villagers to be unaware. Dark clouds soon gathered densely in the sky. A Ling remarked that if they found the rain disastrous enough, they would come to seek help. She then went inside and cautioned a Chu against acting too impulsively in the future. If people didn't experience some hardship first, they wouldn't be willing to spend money on them. They had to let the floodwaters rise for a few days before offering their services. Only when they granted people hope in their darkest moments would they be seen as living saints. If they issued warnings of disaster while things were still peaceful, those ignorant fools would only regard them as harbingers of misfortune. Afterward, a Chu wanted to take a look at the item A Ling had brought. A Ling opened the storage room and revealed to a Chu that inside the cage was a monster that brought storms. It had been sealed inside by Jin Tian, and they only carried it to control the rain at a moderate level. However, if the seal was fully lifted, the monster would escape. It had the body of a beast, the head of a human, wings for flight, but it could also slither like a snake. A Ling warned that the seal must not come into contact with water, as it would lose its effect if it did. A Chu thought A Ling was worrying too much since the creature was imprisoned and wrapped in waterproof fabric, making it impossible for water to reach it. However, it was best to be cautious because if something went wrong, they wouldn't be able to take responsibility for the chaos the monster would cause. The next morning, a Chu traveled to another village beyond the reach of the storm. There, she found a group of children teasing Zilan. Zilan transformed into a tree to scare them off, but they weren't frightened. A Chu and her companions had to step in to stop them and take Zilan in. Zilan could even speak and thanked her, which she found amusing. Meanwhile, Yang Yao happened to pass by, but was unaware that Zilan was there. Later, A Ling heard that a Chu had brought something back and went to check, only to find that a Chu was using Zilan to deceive the villagers, claiming it was a divine tree to extort money. Since A Ling couldn't make Zilan transform into a tree on command, she poked its head, causing it to cry. The villagers immediately saw her as a fraud, so she grabbed Zilan's head tightly, making it hurt until it sprouted a tree. However, the collapsing roof damaged the storage room where the monster's seal was kept. The villagers, believing Zilan was truly a divine tree, knelt and worshipped it. Meanwhile, the water caused Zilan to shrink, and a drop of water landed on the monster's seal. The moment A Ling sensed something was wrong and rushed over, it was already too late. The monster had completely broken free and begun wreaking havoc. A Chu ran to A Ling, suggesting they work together to stop the monster before it destroyed the dam. However, A Ling had assessed the situation and was confident that the dam wouldn't break as long as the monster didn't go too far. Just as she finished speaking, the monster spread its wings and took off, forcing both of them to give chase. They soon found the monster rampaging near a village. But Achu noticed that Aling didn't seem too urgent and was simply observing the situation. She wasn't sure if Aling was coming up with a plan or just stalling. Suddenly, they saw the monster suddenly freeze in place as if being attacked. Both of them quickly spotted Yang Yao nearby. Achu recognized him as the one who had requested her services in exchange for Yan An's liquor. Upon hearing that Yang Yao had subdued a guardian stone statue in an instant, Aling decided to approach him. Unexpectedly, she attacked Yang Yao, stopping him from continuing his drawing. She had heard of Yang Yao as someone who specialized in capturing demons with ink and paper, and now had the chance to meet him in person. She admired his skill in exorcising demons and saving people, but since the monster belonged to Jin Tian, she wanted to capture it herself and wouldn't let Yang Yao interfere. Yang Yao, however, didn't care whose pet it was if it harmed people. He wouldn't let it roam free. He then summoned Xuan Kai to confront Aling. However, Xuan Kai was unable to get close to her. Yang Yao realized that Xuan Kai seemed to have weakened, and Aling immediately informed him that the monster's reign had the power to weaken mystical creatures caught in it. He tried calling Xuan Kai back, but Xuan Kai stubbornly continued fighting. Aling then pinned Yang Yao against a wall, and Xuan Kai was pierced through by her attack. Desperate, Yang Yao called out to Jian Su, knowing she harbored resentment toward him, but needing her help now more than ever. He used his own blood to summon Jian Su and pleaded with her to destroy the monster before it became too dangerous. Jian Su appeared and engaged in battle with Aling, while Yang Yao rushed to rescue Xuan Kai. Realizing his mistake, he sealed Xuan Kai back into the scroll. As Jian Su fought, she suddenly noticed Zilan nearby and quickly ensnared it with a rope. Overjoyed to see Zilan again, she was caught off guard when Aling launched a surprise attack, forcing her to toss Zilan toward Yang Yao. He ran forward and caught it, unsure whether he should feel happy or troubled to see Zilan again. Jian Su had already lost both arms by this point, and Yang Yao couldn't find a dry place to finish drawing the monster because, while the paper was waterproof, the ink would still dissolve in the rain. His anxiety was sensed by Zilan, who then grew into a massive tree and urged Yang Yao to save Jian Su. Yang Yao had always feared that he wouldn't even be able to protect himself. Yet he couldn't just stand by and watch these monsters wreak havoc on innocent people. He wanted to save others, not for gratitude, but because it was the right thing to do. However, those he had protected had turned against him simply because he was different. Today, they revered Zilan as a divine tree, but tomorrow, they might see it as a monster. He felt guilty for bringing Zilan into such a cruel world. He couldn't bear to see the child he created suffer, yet he had no way to take on that burden in Zilan's place. All he could do was blame himself for being too weak and apologize to Zilan over and over until the monster was finally subdued. But at the moment the monster vanished, both he and Jian Su were stunned. Zilan had been reduced to a mere sapling. Jian Su returned to the scroll, and before Yang Yao could react, Aling suddenly attacked and restrained him. She intended to take the scroll, but before she could, a figure rushed in, someone who had once helped Yang Yao on the ship. It was Wang Yan. Wang Yan easily slashed through Aling's steel wires and closed in on her, forcing her to deploy her wires more densely to counter him. Wang Yan had long been searching for something he couldn't cut through. Achu arrived at that moment, and realizing she couldn't handle both Yang Yao and Wang Yan alone, Aling had no choice but to retreat. Achu would only be a hindrance, and it seemed they wouldn't be able to reclaim the monster today, so she ordered a full withdrawal. Only after things settled did Yang Yao ask why Wang Yan was there. Wang Yan revealed that he had investigated the scholar from the ship, as per Yang Yao's request, and discovered that his family had been deceived and swindled of all their assets by a group of practitioners using dark arts. That group was none other than the people who had just fled the disciples of Jin Tian from the northern regions. Jin Tian had reclaimed vast lands and established his own sect, expanding its influence by sending disciples across the land to spread false claims, exploit religious beliefs, and defraud people of their wealth. In short, they were nothing but con artists. Xiao King's sect had been investigating Jin Tian for a long time. Yang Yao thanked him for taking the trouble to look into it. Xiao King, however, was curious why Yang Yao had gotten entangled with them in the first place. Yang Yao then told him about Zilan and confessed his deep regret and his fear of facing Zilan, knowing that he had made a mistake in bringing it into the world. Yet, now that it was gone, he felt no relief, only emptiness. Xiao King believed Yang Yao was overthinking things. Instead of drowning in regret, he should have simply asked Zilan whether it regretted being born, what responsibility he truly owed it, and how it perceived the people around it. He bluntly pointed out that Yang Yao wasn't afraid of Zilan or others' opinions. What he truly feared was his own power, the fact that his scroll could create life itself. But one's fate should be in their own hands, and there was no reason to regret that. Xilon had chosen to sacrifice itself to save him using its own abilities. Yet here Yang Yao was, afraid of his own power. It was utterly ridiculous. Their abilities were granted by the heavens to eliminate evil and protect the people, not to be ridiculed by others. Shao King then remarked that he had misjudged Yang Yao, thinking he was an intelligent person. With that, he walked away, leaving Yang Yao struggling with the weight of his own self-doubt and foolishness. Meanwhile, Jin Tian was furious that Chu had allowed his sealed monster to be taken. Deciding that she was no longer of any use, he ordered her to be eliminated. Later, Yang Yao returned to find Yan An, who had been tirelessly producing ink to help Xuan Kai regain his strength. Yan An was surprised to learn that Xuan Kai had been weakened by the rain. Yang Yao explained that the monster's water was special, it could even extinguish divine flames. Just then, there was a knock at the door. The two of them opened it, only to find themselves face to face with a young woman and an assassin. The girl stated that she wasn't there to buy Yan An's wine, but to collect a debt since they had damaged a lantern she had crafted for a client. She had come to demand compensation. Yang Yao immediately blamed Yan An and left him to pay, but the girl didn't want money, she wanted both of their lives. The assassin at her side lunged at them, forcing Yan An to step in and defend, but he was quickly overwhelmed. Yang Yao was then forced to fight, but the assassin swiftly threw both of them outside and drew his sword to strike. Yan An reached for his feathers to attack, but the girl reminded him that her assassin would still die if he came into contact with Yan An's blood. Because of his mercy, Yan An was struck down. Just as the girl was about to end his life, Yang Yao rushed toward them only for the girl's red thread to suddenly transform into a bird and fly away. To everyone's surprise, she then lowered her head, apologized to Yan An, and pleaded for his help. Yang Yao was completely bewildered. Once inside, she introduced herself as Xingji, from an eastern nation. Yan An recognized her family as a clan that specialized in intelligence and information trade. She admitted her fault and asked for Yan An's forgiveness, but Yang Yao remained distrustful, believing she was a fraud. However, she revealed that she knew about Yang Yao's injured spirit and that it was currently being treated inside the house. She claimed she could help heal Xuan Kai, but Yang Yao dismissed her, believing that soaking Xuan Kai in ink for a few days would be enough for recovery. Xingji scoffed at his ink, calling it cheap and unworthy of being considered a true restorative for Xuan Kai. She then proposed a deal: if Yang Yao helped her, she would save Xuan Kai. Yan An initially saw no benefit in this arrangement, but since delaying any longer would only endanger Xuan Kai further, he reluctantly allowed Yang Yao to take the offer. When they brought Xuan Kai out, Xingji observed that he was nothing more than an empty husk. She explained that using her ink would alter him in unpredictable ways, but she couldn't say for sure what the outcome would be. She then released the ink into Xuan Kai, and an unexpected transformation occurred. Xuan Kai became more masculine and even gained the ability to speak. His first words, calling Yang Yao a shorty. He then looked around and found the place rather shabby, while Xingji realized that Xuan Kai had absorbed some of her personality. And truthfully, the place was indeed quite old. Yan An, displeased, threatened to kick them all out, forcing Xingji to quickly pacify him. Xingji then questioned Yang Yao, asking if he had never wondered why Xuan Kai had always remained silent. The reason, she explained, was that he had lost half of his soul. Every living being was formed by 3 souls, each granted by one of the 3 realms. Heaven bestowed reverence, earth provided tradition, and humanity shaped individuality. When a person died, their souls returned to their respective realms. Monsters, however, were created by the lingering grievances of the human soul, which prevented them from passing on. Xuan Kai, being an earth soul, had only retained combat abilities but lacked personality or speech. She didn't know where his other 2 souls had gone, but since he was an ink spirit, it was likely that his previous owner had used his soul to write something of great importance. Xuan Kai, having no memory, had no idea who his former owner was. Xingji could only use ink to temporarily prevent his complete dissolution, but if they kept relying on this method, he would eventually become nothing more than an ordinary ink stick rather than a sentient being. The only way to truly save him was to retrieve the writings that had absorbed his soul and reintegrate them into him. However, they had no idea where to start looking. Xuan Kai refused to go with Xingji for her to investigate on his behalf. But Yan An wanted to cut to the chase. What problem was Xingji facing? She admitted that the information she was about to share was highly valuable, so she expected compensation. Yan An immediately decided they no longer needed her help and showed her the door. Forced to reconsider, Xingji relented and made an exception for him. She then revealed that her clan possessed a method to record a person's entire life and a technique to determine whether someone's life held any real value. The assassin had just put on the bracelet, yet it failed to form any distinct shape. However, when the same thread was placed around Yan An's neck, it intricately wove itself into the shape of a bird. This convinced Xingji that Yan An's life held great value. She wanted him to wear the bracelet so it could record his life, as she needed to determine whether he was worth negotiating with her clan. If not, both he and Yang Yao would have to repay their debt for damaging her lantern. The price for that lantern was the total lifespan of every living being inside it. Yang Yao initially thought it would only be a few days, but after multiplying those days by the thousands of people and hundreds of animals inside, the cost came to over 100 years. If divided, each individual would lose 50 years of life, which still seemed manageable. However, upon hearing this, both Yan An and Yang Yao turned pale and had no choice but to comply with Xingji's request to avoid the debt. Yan An agreed to help her but didn't want Yang Yao to get away without contributing, so he asked if Yang Yao had any debt to pay. Xingji was also curious about Yang Yao's life and attempted to measure it with her bracelet. However, the thread unexpectedly vanished completely, leading her to conclude that Yang Yao was likely a wasted existence whom no one would remember. She then inquired how the two of them had entered the lantern's world, but neither of them knew. There were only 3 ways to enter. 1. Being personally brought in by a member of her clan. 2. Possessing a key. Or 3. Being granted permission by the client who commissioned the lantern. The client was not the 2 children of Lady Fu Ling, but rather Lord Fu Ling, a being born from the heavens and earth, revered in legend as someone who stood above all others. Neither of them had any connection to Fu Ling, so Xingji decided to visit the scene the next day for clues. Yan An decided that Yang Yao would accompany her while he stayed home. Xingji assumed Yan An would let her stay the night, but he promptly kicked them all out. Xingji and her assassin went to find an inn, while Yang Yao, as always, slept on Yan An's rooftop. Curious about how Xingji's clan made money, Yang Yao asked her about it. She explained that they used to work as royal scribes, recording history for the imperial court, and also dealt in intelligence trade. However, when the dynasty changed, her clan was forced to retreat into the mountains and began taking private commissions to document lives. Yang Yao found it incredible that simply recording information and activating the lantern could create such an illusion. However, compared to the scroll he possessed, the lantern's power was far inferior. The scroll held a much greater force. The next morning, when they arrived at the site, Xingji found no useful clues and decided to search for the illusion key. As the lantern's creator, she had a way to locate it. Suddenly, Mr. Shan appeared behind them. Xingji immediately recognized him as the aide to a northern king. Mr. Shan was also Xuan Kai's former master, and the one holding the illusion's key. He asked Xingji to stop pursuing the lantern issue, and then revealed to Yang Yao that Xuan Kai's soul had been used to write historical records of the era Yang Yao had witnessed in the illusion and age when the Yin Yin tribe was revered, only to be betrayed and forgotten. If Yang Yao wished to uncover the secrets of that time, he needed to head southeast. Once he found the ancient texts recording that era, he would learn both the truth and how to save Xuan Kai. After delivering this message, Mr. Shan departed. Determined to save Xuan Kai at all costs, Yang Yao resolved to embark on this journey. Meanwhile, A Chu received an assignment from Jin Tian and set off with the 4th disciple. Upon hearing this, A Ling sensed what was about to happen and asked A Chu if she had any final wishes. A Chu had many, but A Ling only allowed her to choose one. However, A Chu wanted to return before making a decision. A Ling, too, hoped that A Chu would make it back safely. And with that, the episode came to an end.